Welcome, Sarah. It's so good to have you. If you just want to get started and introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about what you're up to now.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. This is a real delight. So I'm Sarah Krasley. I'm the founder and CEO of a 6-year-old industrial ed tech company. And the problem that we're working on is, right now when our clothing is made in factories, it's largely made by people who are using machines to make it happen. But automation and consolidation is coming to supply chains. And we want to make sure that folks have the skills they need to stay relevant as that shift takes place. So we build digital games that help workers gain the advanced manufacturing skills they need.
That's super cool. Where did you get the idea or the motivation to solve this problem?
Well, I come from a manufacturing family. I grew up in Allentown, basically in that Billy Joel song. My grandfather worked in the blast furnace at a big steel plant. And as I was young, the plant went out of business, and there were decades and decades of time where I saw a big workforce laid off and no other jobs for folks to really go to. So I think I have that lived experience myself. I worked in an envelope factory while I was home for the summers in college, and I still have the muscle memory of the envelopes coming off the machine and turning them twice and putting them in the box. So I also have lived experience of what it feels like to work in front of a machine in a factory and be really judged by how productive you are and how accurate the work you're doing is. And I think the idea for Shimmy came, I think, in a moment of failure, frankly. I was out in San Francisco. I had just pitched to the Gap an idea for a business that's very different than the one that Shimmy is. And I basically was handed my hat. They were like, thanks, but no thanks. And I got on a plane and I flew back to New York, and Hidden Figures was the movie that was playing on the plane. And I was watching Octavia Spencer's character, who's this amazing woman, and her name is Dorothy Vaughan. And if you don't know about her, you should definitely look her up. She was one of the amazing women at NASA who really helped the agency move into a totally new realm. And she saw these IBM mainframe computers coming into NASA, and then she looked behind her and she saw the 300 Black women who were doing the manual computing and said, I better teach them how to program those. And that's what she did. And I thought, there's something in that model that I really want to adopt. And that was the inspiration for the company, and we've been running ever since.
That's a great story. How did you get started in entrepreneurship? It seems like if you were pitching to the Gap, then maybe you were pitching to other people earlier in your career, but what attracted you to entrepreneurship and starting your own business?
I mean, they say that you should start your own business based on something that makes you really angry. It shouldn't be a great love or anything like that, like something that just really fills you with rage. And I think I want the future of work to be fair. And when I see groups of people being left out of the jobs in the future, that makes me really, really angry. And, I've worked in tech and manufacturing my whole career, and those are very male-dominated industries. There's, women are moving into the highest roles now, but that transition has been very slow. And I thought, you know what, I'm tired of working on teams with mostly men, and I think I want to build a culture for my company that is more resonant with my values and is a place where everybody can thrive. So Shimmy is 15 people. 85% of our team are women, and everybody has some lived experience of maybe being underestimated at some point in their life, not because of their skills or what they've achieved, but what they look like. And that's been really powerful to build a place where people like that can bridle that energy and use it to help other people who are also being underestimated.
I love that connection there. And I think I haven't heard it framed as much for inspiration for something that makes you angry or enraged. But I think most entrepreneurs would probably agree with that, or at a minimum, it's like, oh, there's an itch that needs to be scratched, and I really want to make that go away, or make that better for people.
Yeah, practically speaking too, you also have to stay interested in it for a really long time. I've been going to Bangladesh to, work in the supply chain there for the last 10 years, and I'm still fascinated by the industry and the people, and figuring out how to make that system better. So yeah, it's got to be something interesting, and I do think it's about anger, because that's a real driving force. I think we're at a moment in culture where there's a lot of anger. We don't quite know how to talk about it or how to normalize it in our conversations. So it might be a little taboo for me to say that, but I think it's really true.
No, absolutely. How does Odyssey the Mind fit into this? So what's your experience with Odyssey the Mind growing up, and then how do you think that impacted the career path that you're on now?
Yeah, I guess Odyssey of the Mind started for me uh, basically because I had a crush on Harry Connick Jr. And there was this movie, I grew up in Allentown. Basically what we did as like middle school kids is like we went to the movie theater, and I must have gone to see Little Man Tate. Like, I don't know, like I could probably recite parts of the dialogue in that movie by heart. And there's a scene in that movie where he gets to go to Odyssey of the Mind, and it just seemed like such a cool place. Like I thought, wow, there are all these people, all these nerds basically that are, building these amazing balsa wood structures and doing creative problem solving. And lucky me, the middle school that I went to was adopting Odyssey of the Mind. So I was able to join a team and participate, and it was truly life-changing. I'll definitely say that. I think I've always been a smart kid, but I've never been a kid that's tested well, ever. Standardized tests are incredibly hard for me. They still are. And I think my performance was always like middle or bottom of the class because, I just would get testing anxiety, and that's how I was being judged. And OM was just an opportunity for me to really shine, to build so much confidence that, like, not only was I smart, I really, like, if given the right environment, I could come up with amazing ideas and have a team of folks, and we could work together and collaborate. So yeah, it was truly life-changing for me.
On the point about building confidence, what do you think about the program helps improve that skill set or aspect of kids in particular, or maybe at least like how did it help you in your journey?
It's an interesting alchemy to it. I remember there were kids on my team, like my friend Kim, who was amazing at spontaneous. Like she could just, she amazing, bubbling up of ideas. And there were other folks on our team that got like a little bit flummoxed by that, but then could really shine in a long-term problem. So I would say the variety of opportunities to think creatively at different speeds, in different settings, with different materials is really important. I think there's a piece that I still hold with me, which is I do better when I have limits and can design within a loophole. And I think the structure that the long-term problems are given in gives you those design constraints, and then you have to figure out how to design within them. And that still is my preferred way for, like, if you give me a blue sky, it's not going to be as enjoyable as if you give me some limitations that I need to like reach around and maneuver within. So I think that's another wonderful way you designed the program for kids like I was.
It's interesting. You could almost make a parallel, like you're told to sew anything. And you being in the garment industry, that's a really hard challenge. And there are probably
Yes.
designers there who are like, oh yeah, I can do something crazy. But saying, okay, you need to sew a blouse and it needs to be under $100 and it needs to incorporate the color red. You can still get a really amazing variety of interpretations of that. And so it's still open-ended, but the few, 3 or 4 constraints on there can almost spur more innovation than just saying sew anything you want to.
Totally. And that's life, right? There are constraints all around us. We're living in it's all the world has always been constantly changing, but really to thrive on this planet right now, you've got to be somebody who is comfortable with constant change, and all of these boundaries around you. Like, so I'm glad that that part is still so present in the problems that you're giving the next generation of leaders.
Absolutely. I also think in thinking about confidence, it's one of those things that you need to push people, but you can't push them too much. Because if someone is at a point where they're going to break, or it's way outside their comfort zone and they won't even attempt it, then that's not necessarily going to make them stronger or help them overcome something. But I think Odyssey of the Mind, at least from what I've seen, usually strikes that balance of, it's an 8-minute performance. We're not talking about 2 hours of reciting lines. And so it's for many kids, it's their first time they've done some sort of theater production or, performed in front of people. And then that's an in to maybe doing bigger and more extravagant productions, or it's the first time they've built something. And so now they, want to go build more things. And it's just enough of a taste to build that initial confidence to then take on bigger challenges.
Yeah, and it's a safe space. I mean, I'm excited. I'm coming back as a volunteer this year and I'm going to see it firsthand, but I remember feeling like a nice blend of fear in, as we performed our piece, but also like the team spirit between myself and the rest of the team, and then being able to check out what the other teams did and like, trash talking kind of, about the other teams, which nobody should do now, but it was, it was the 90s. It was a different time. Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Do you have a specific Odyssey of the Mind challenge that you remember overcoming, or a thing that you worked on? Maybe it was a prop or a costume or a skit that you wrote. Anything in particular is still etched in your memory?
I do. I definitely do. So it was called the Folktale Challenge, which I believe is the performance challenge now. And one of the constraints or the requirements for it was that all of the props for the production needed to fit into a trunk that was a particular size. But we really wanted to have some backdrops so that, it wasn't just the things in the box. Like we didn't put on a hat or a raincoat or something. It was, we really had some sets to show off. So what we realized was that we could build a trunk that was 2 C shapes, basically, so that there were 2 interlocking C's that would open up, and then we could build some bolts so the sides of that trunk would become walls, and then we strung a clothesline across and had like a banner behind it. So the trunk even itself became part of the prop because it unfolded and then became different dimensions in a different shape. And I remember us like that hack, like the aha moment with that was super exciting for our team. And then I think like somebody's dad helped us with like, drill and like putting that together. But that was a moment of creative delight. I'm still delighted, even like thinking about, like that we did it. Yeah, it was really cool.
It's fun hearing about those types of things, and it's like, people remember very, very vividly something they built in 8th grade. And,
Yeah.
this is, we fit it together like this, and we had the clothesline, and, these are the challenges we overcame. And yeah, they're very vivid experiences. And so it's fun
Totally.
to hear how solving something like that really resonates into your adult life.
It does, for sure. Like I remember, like, I can taste the like Cool Ranch Doritos and cherry Coke, that we used to have, like, while that was like fueling all of this energy. And yeah, I can hear the Lemonheads in the background. I think we listened to like It's a Shame About Ray, the whole time we constructed things. And it's a very fond memory that it's been nice to retreat to in this conversation.
Yeah. So you work in the garment industry, um,
Mhm.
and oftentimes in Odyssey of the Mind, there are challenges to have creative use of materials.
Mm.
So what's something in your day-to-day work that you've encountered, where you've had to be creative with using different types of materials?
Yeah. Well, for us, our challenge is really the folks that we reach in the supply chain are mostly, women, and many of them don't have any formalized education after fourth grade. And what we're trying to do is teach them like pretty advanced like STEM skills, so that they can leapfrog into those jobs running automated machines and working in the more advanced roles. So, we had to think about like, how do we design an interface that is picture based? We've utilized natural language processing. So somebody that like can't read anything can listen along with big headphones. We realized that the more peripherals we had on the computer, like a mouse or a keyboard, increased the nervousness that somebody might break the device and then they would be held responsible for it. So a lot of this is done by iteration. We have a hunch about something, we go out into the field and we say, was our assumption correct or wasn't it? What kind of data do we have to validate what we think? And then we just continue improving and adjusting over time. So that might not be about, a particular material, but it was certainly a way that we adjusted the hardware to be more supportive. A lot of people said, why don't you just do the training in VR? And I said, well, many of these people feel really unsafe as they're walking home from a factory at night, and blocking someone's peripheral vision is not going to be an environment where they're really going to feel very safe. So we really try to use human-centered design principles and just be as supportive as we can.
Can you talk a little bit more about some of the prototyping processes that you've gone through? So it sounds like you come in with a hunch, maybe you have something that's a little bit janky, or maybe you have, maybe even like
Or a
some sort of
lot
like
janky.
cardboard, yeah, like a cardboard setup. And you're like, okay, if you place the objects in this way, like what do people reach for first? But how have you used prototyping, and maybe what's an example of how that process has gone?
Yeah, I mean, I live in New York City. This is our office space in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and it's wonderful doing work in New York City because you can pretty much find any population of people that you're looking for. And there are two large Bangladeshi neighborhoods in Queens and in Brooklyn. And we found community organizations in those neighborhoods, and they allowed us to do a simulation. So we had a newly immigrated group of Bangladeshi women come in, and they were our very vocal testers in the beginning, and they told us what worked and what didn't. We realized that some of the natural language processing we were using was terrible translations. So we realized we need to build our own corpus, particularly of industrial terms, so that way, we're just getting more accuracy on that front. So I'm thankful that our whole team didn't have to fly to Southeast Asia and do that prototype and fail there. We were able to do it really, really close to home, make some iterations. We went back to that group of women. They told us what was right and what still needed to happen. And then we had a prototype that we could take to Bangladesh. And that's how it all began.
That's great. And I think, thinking through how do you fail quickly in order to then
Mhm.
get to the next round of whatever the iteration is. And in this case, it was you need to, the complication was you're primary test group is, 20 hours away on plane rides. And so how do you fail in your same neighborhood? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I can think of corollaries with Odyssey of the Mind with maybe, can you fail in your own garage versus failing at a tournament site, or even maybe, if you have a team practice, and rather than
Mhm.
waiting for your team practice, you say, oh, I'll take a shot at this, at, moving the vehicle in this way, or reading through the skit and seeing if it's under 8 minutes. But
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of lessons there in prototyping.
Yeah,
Um,
and like I failed this year, but I'm going to come back next year, That's pretty cool. That's
yeah.
really very akin to like a lean startup model for sure.
And I think it's why you see more experienced teams often perform better, is
Mhm.
because they've gone through a couple iterations and they're like, okay, this is what, we understand how far we can get in our cost limit with backdrops, or, how used is the motor that we attach to our vehicle before too used means it's going to go up in smoke, or
Yeah,
whatever that is. And so that's cool to see kids be able to come back every year and take what they learned the last year and apply it.
that's the entrepreneurial process. Like that is what it is for sure.
Absolutely. So you also describe yourself and your company as mission driven.
Mhm.
How would you define that, and how do you think that impacts the work that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think I realized and frequently reassess for myself, what is work for me? Like, and for me, work has to be meaningful. I really believe that we spend way too much time at work to be doing things that we don't feel connected to and we don't feel like is making the world a better place than we found it. So I've been lucky enough, that envelope factory job that I had early in life, like was probably not mission driven, but my goodness, it gave me enormous empathy for people who, unlike me, maybe didn't get to go to college or were really impacted by automation displacing them. So it was a wonderful experience. I think, as you didn't ask me this question, but I want to say now that like life teaches you things that you don't really know where to organize in the moment. And then you realize later on, like, oh, that was actually, something that was really relevant here. Like I was a DJ for a while. And I think that exercise of mixing this song with this song and having them not quite like you wouldn't normally put them together has become one of my superpowers of putting like really weird things together in the companies and the products that I built. Like when I was at Autodesk, which is one of the largest software companies in the world, I, was on a sustainability team, which was a cross-functional team. And we said, look, everybody in the world is designing buildings and infrastructure and products in our software. What if we gave them a great material library where they could, before the thing was actually built, they could experiment with materials with different carbon footprints or water footprints and make a better decision in that design process instead of waiting for the thing to roll off the assembly line and then there's not much you can do about it anyway. So, I'm thinking about the jump I took from not having mission driven work to being lucky enough to do it. And those moments were hard, but I'm really glad I didn't give up. Eventually, I got my little window in, and I've been lucky enough to keep growing and building on those experiences to a career that I really like. That still, I'm angry and I'm still hungry and I'm still learning, which is, I think, all you could ask for.
Yeah. What was your DJ name?
Crazy Craze. Yeah.
Crazy Craze.
If
I
you have a
love it.
last name like Krasley, you gotta have fun.
You got to just lean into that.
Yeah.
Uh, to your point about mixing things that typically don't get mixed, and I think you mentioned in the terms of maybe mixing different types of music. Um, I also think that's something that Odyssey of the Mind encourages in being interdisciplinary. And so, whether it's mixing something very technical, like building a device or a vehicle, with something very theatrical, like having a skit and props. And rather than saying, we're going to segment all of the theatrical kids into one space, and they're going to be theatrical over here. And we're going to segment all the technical kids, and they're going to be technical over here. We say we can do all of these things simultaneously, and the technical kids are going to get a little more theatrical, and the theatrical kids are getting a little more technical. And then maybe there's some other dimensions that, I'm forgetting or not mentioning, but everyone kind of sees other parts of it. And oftentimes the coolest solutions are when you take something where it wasn't typically designed in that way and it's repurposed. And I think that's also very, very common in entrepreneurship, where you might take, let's say, a learning software, and it's not typically used in a certain way. And you say, well, there's this huge gap over here, and why can't we apply it in this way for this population?
Really true. And I think what you're doing in, bringing kids that have different strengths together is really helping them teach each other. Like I love the work that Alan Alda is doing with his institute at Stony Brook, which is really helping scientists and technical people learn how to talk about it and to tell a story and to be able to read the room and adjust that story when you're going way too deep and you've lost everybody, because he feels like these ideas are not going to accelerate if those scientists and technicians don't know how to tell the story properly. So it's wonderful that you're sharpening your technical skills and learning how to tell a story about it that's going to bring everybody else along with you.
You've also mentioned a few times, and it's on your website, that you're very passionate about empowering women and people who typically are not in positions of power or who have been overlooked. How do you think, I guess, Odyssey of the Mind could play a role in that? Or as a woman on an Odyssey of the Mind team, how do you think that played out?
I think my team was all female, if I remember correctly. And, I think we need strong female role models, as well as we need, male allies, and we need to make room for everybody, people who aren't gender conforming, people who are figuring it out. So I think I'm excited to see what that looks like when I come as a volunteer in a little while. I think, if I think about our team in Bangladesh, we have a group of women who are advanced machine trainers, and it was hard to find a group of women who had that advanced machine experience. But they make they're so cool. Like if they lived in Brooklyn, they would live in Ridgewood or something. They're like the coolest women, and they make TikToks, and they've really reframed for a lot of production line workers, you can be feminine and run an advanced machine. And here's kind of some ways you can begin to play with that and make it your own. So I think in my own life, it's been hard to model what I can't see. I think back to a product manager at Autodesk. Her name's Hilda Sevens, and she was this powerful, really amazing woman who, was also the only one in the, the section, but was bringing these incredible products to market. And I thank my lucky stars that I got to watch her and kind of see how she did it, and have her mentor me as I figured out, what is my leadership style and how do I really make it my own?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Last question. What's something that you are reading or have read, or maybe some other source of media, maybe it's a podcast or a YouTube channel, that is you're loving it and you'd want to share it?
I just read a book called The Persuaders by Anand Giridharadas, and it really, I just didn't want it to end. It was a delight. It really focuses on, in this world that we live in, where it's, particularly in the political sphere in the US, you have two different parties and they don't even listen to each other anymore because the animosity is so high. So he really gets into how persuasion happens in organizing, how maybe the goal isn't to get somebody to believe in what you believe, but just to be able to get them to to ask a question of themselves. And that provides an opening where you can really kind of talk to each other. So it really made an impact on me. It's an awesome book.
It does sound like an awesome book. My wife is in policy school, and so these are
Ah,
these are these are questions that she's grappling with, and wondering about the future of democracy and how we can operate in, an increasingly ideological, polarized world. But it sounds
yeah.
like that book would have some insights into that, or how we can operate.
Yeah, I'm certainly not the expert that she is on it, but oh, I couldn't put this book down. It was so good. Yeah.
Great. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It sounds like you're doing really cool things, and I'm glad that you're hopping back in to judging, and hopefully Spontaneous will impress you with all the cool solutions that kids are thinking of.
I'm super excited. I'm going to get my stopwatch all ready to go. And thank you so much for having me. OM really, like, I still feel it's made me who I am, and I'm eternally grateful.